Good morning, Gathering Place. It's good to be with you again this morning, even though we are still very much apart. For the last few weeks, we have been discussing four very distinctive miracles that Jesus has done that all display his power in a number of different ways. The first one was calming a storm on the Sea of Galilee, which showed his power over nature. The second was the healing of a Gadarene demoniac filled with a legion of demons, in demonstrating his power over the spirit world. The third was healing an unhealable hemorrhaging by a woman who was ceremonially unpure for all of her social life, or for 12 years of her social life, as did as depicted by Judaic tradition. The last one was the resurrection of Jairus' daughter, the little 12-year-old girl who had fallen ill, literally died, and Jesus came in and had her rise up. Now, all of these stories are all talked about in all three synoptic gospels: Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Mark is the most proficient writer of those three miracles. Luke follows along with Mark in what he displays in his gospel. Matthew didn't really seem to give a lot of details. He didn't really make it prominent story. There's very little facts that we get from Matthew that we didn't get from Mark and Luke already. So it's kind of interesting here that Matthew at this point is going to talk about two miracles that Mark and Luke do not even have. Um, or at least it seems that way. I mean, Matthew kind of sort of is telling stories, but the stories do have a lot of references that seem very familiar with Mark and Luke. And so, to understand my enigmatic trust in this story, let's read the story first. We don't have to mash this one up. It comes from Matthew chapter 9, 27 to 31. As Jesus went on from there, two blind men followed him, calling out, "Have mercy on us, son of David!" When he had gone indoors, the blind men came to him, and he asked them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" "Yes, Lord," they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, will it be done to you?" And their sight was restored. Jesus warned them sternly, "See that no one knows about this." But they went out and spread the news about him all over the region. Now, many people want to conflate this story because there are some similarities with the story of blind Bartimaeus. Blind Bartimaeus is mentioned, the name is only mentioned in Mark, but we have that story in the other synoptic gospels. And that is, again, with more detail than what Matthew gives. However, um, you know, they conflate these stories for the common parts of the story: that the recipients of Jesus' mercy were blind, and that they repeat the same cry, "Have mercy on us, son of David." Well, there are differences in the stories as well. The Mark and Luke stories take place in Jericho and lay much later in Jesus' ministry. But the big reason is that Matthew also tells the story of a blind person in Jericho. So these are obviously not the same stories, even though there are a few similarities that we can look at. So we're going to treat this as a separate miracle happening immediately after the miracle of Jairus' daughter and her resurrection. The You'll notice that it started as Jesus went on from there. Where was there? Well, there was the house of Jairus, where he had again resurrected this little girl. So essentially, this is going to be big miracle number 5 in about a 3-day span. Now, 2 blind men followed him and cried out. These men had intentionally sought out Jesus. They weren't just sitting on the roadside and Jesus just happened to pass by. They were looking for him. Again, with all of the miracles that were being told at this particular point, they wanted to find out if Jesus could heal them also. And so there's one big problem with that, of course, and that is they're blind. How do you find and follow somebody that you can't see them? You don't know where they are. And so essentially, they are searching as best they can, and they do end up following him. Um, Now remember, the large crowd that greeted Jesus as he got off the boat that very morning, and there were many people seeking mercy. It's likely that they may have even been in that crowd. And if not, then they heard that Jesus had returned and were still trying to search for him. Remember that the crowd was left behind. That it's my guess that the disciples of Jesus, other than Peter, James, and John, were holding back the crowd and trying to dissuade them from following Jesus so that Jesus could work his miracle in private. So they may have been there for at that time. Now that means that all the other disciples went someplace else, and Jesus is now getting ready to join them again. Um, but you can imagine their disadvantage at being able to find Jesus and which way he goes. Have mercy on us, Son of David. Outside of Matthew, the Son of David does not appear in other Gospels except for the healing of Bartimaeus. Questioning whether Jesus could be the Son of David and claiming him to be the Son of David during his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Matthew, on the other hand, has 3 other incidents of people crying out, Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, probably one reason for this is that Matthew's gospel was meant for the Jews. Mark and Luke, especially, were writing more to the Gentiles. So this phrase of Son of David really does not make a heck of a lot of sense to the Greeks or to surrounding Gentile peoples. It means a great deal to the Jews, though. You know, and Matthew reports of other miracles as well, where they call out, Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, in one respect, any Jew descended with the royal blood of David could be considered a son of David. That's just the phrase that the Jews use. Just as all Jews could be claimed to be a son of Abraham. Uh, we see this sometimes even in like the Chronicles of Narnia. Note that all of the children in the Chronicles of Narnia, all the ones that were named, were sent there, were often called sons of and daughters of Adam. So it's a strong reference just there. But it also lends itself to being a messianic reference. From 2 Samuel, chapter 7, verses 11 through 16. It reads this way. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. This is in reference to David. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, and floggings inflicted by human hands. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. Now, at first glance, or in the first century or so after uh, Second Samuel wrote this, or Samuel wrote Second Samuel, it would be easy to assume that the author was probably referring to Solomon, a direct offspring of David, his flesh and blood. Israel is at the height of its power as a kingdom, and Solomon is the one that built the temple. So many of these prophecies are taking place by Solomon. The problem is that almost immediately after Solomon perished, then his kingdom was divided. It was no longer the kingdom of Israel. You had 10 tribes being part of Israel. You had 2 tribes in Judea. Furthermore, his house and the temple were destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians in 587 BC. So these promises were then given to the still yet to be seen Messiah. And so people were looking for a Messiah to be the fulfillment of this prophecy. And thus Matthew 12:23 has the people asking the question, could this possibly be the Son of David? As I said, many people are calling out to him as the Son of David. Jesus certainly does not deny that he's the Son of David, and he fulfills the miracles that these individuals are asking of him. Jesus then asks, do you believe that I can do this? In the recent previous miracles, faith is extremely important. This is basically true. Jesus owns, excuse me. I skipped a whole section there. The next quiz section, when he had gone indoors. Before Jesus had left on his trip across the lake, 2 days before, he declared that he had no place to lay his head. This is basically true. Jesus owns no property. He owns only what he can carry. But as he travels, he and his disciples have other disciples to host them when they are traveling to different areas. And if they don't, then they do as many travelers of that day would do. They would just find a place alongside the road and camp there. As I said earlier, we have no names of their present location, but a good guess is that they came back to Capernaum. And if they came back to Capernaum, then they are probably staying in Matthew's house. Matthew, you remember, was a tax collector. Tax collectors tended to be very wealthy individuals. You might remember that Matthew held a big banquet for all of his tax collecting friends to come and meet Jesus. it, it's probably a good guess that when Jesus is going inside, he is returning to Matthew's house. Now, Jesus asks, "Do you believe that I can do this?" In the recent previous miracles that we have had, faith has played an extremely important part in whether or not a miracle was done. Now, Jesus can do whatever he wants, he can cure whomever he wants. He doesn't really need their faith. And yet, we've seen times, for example, in Nazareth, where the people had no faith and Jesus could not do any miracles with them. In the miracles that we have just studied, notice that Jesus chastises his own disciples for being so afraid in the storm, for not having faith in where Jesus was going to be leading them. We see it in the woman who had the issue of blood, who had so much faith that she pretty much declared to herself, if I can just touch his garments, then that's all I will need. I will be healed. She had great faith in who Jesus was and the power that he had, that it might even be transferred to his clothes. When Jairus, for a moment, lost faith when he heard that his daughter had died, then remember, Jesus went to him, shored up his faith. Only believe is what Jesus tells him. And that belief is what got him all the way through, took Jesus to his daughter, and his daughter was raised from the dead. Like I said, Jesus can cure whomever he wants. The Gadarene demoniac never asked for or made a statement of faith. And Jesus was able to drive all of the demons out of him, a man who had no voice and could not possibly have asked or made a statement of faith. So Jesus can do more, but it does he does want people to understand that there is a faith in God that you must have for this to happen. So he asked them, "Do you believe that I can do this?" And they both agree. They say yes. Jesus touches their eyes, says a word, and instantly they can see. He then tells them, "See that no one knows about this." Now, Jesus has just done this with Jairus a few moments ago as well. He told them, "Don't tell anybody about what happened here." He's telling the blind men the same thing. And yet, in both cases, the miracles were spread, the news of the miracles were spread all over the entire region. You'll recall that when we talked about Jairus' daughter, I recommended a specific song that tells that story. It's by Don Francisco. And he goes through all the things that Jairus must have been feeling during that time. And then he gets to the point where Jesus tells him not a word. And Don Francisco sees Jairus being quite the opposite. Yes, he was told not to give a word. But in the song, which is not biblical necessarily, but in the song, the title of the song is "Gotta Tell Somebody." I gotta tell somebody. I gotta tell somebody what Jesus did for me. And I think that's kind of the way that many people end up being. It's hard to sit there and be quiet when you know that something special has happened and you know the person that did so. I'm often confused by the fact that, you know, we don't have a command to be silent. We don't have a command that we shouldn't tell anybody what Jesus has done for us. And yet that is exactly what we should be doing, is telling everybody what Jesus has done for us. Go in peace, and we'll discuss the final miracle next week.